What's up, beer geeks? Welcome to the Beer Scholar Family Hour. I'm Chris Cohen. These are my co-beer scholars.
Scott Fielder.
And I'm Chris Crow.
And that is 2% of all existing advanced Cicerones all together sitting at the same table. It's the first time we've all been in the same room together, actually, which is pretty exciting. Pretty stoked about that. How you guys doing? How you feeling?
I'm ready for a beer.
Okay. We're just going to get straight to it.
Just dive in.
Yeah.
I was thinking, as there are more and more advanced Cicerones, we'll have to just invite them to keep...
Oh, totally.
Just to keep the 2% since we've introduced that idea.
True.
Yeah. Otherwise, it'll dilute the concentration that we've established.
Yeah. And we should also at some point do like an event in the area and just see if we can get several more in the same room so that see like what threshold can we get to? Like, can we get like 5%?
Yep. Then we can move to regional conferences.
Right.
Hopefully eventually getting to national.
Yeah. We'll call it AC Con.
I'm pretty sure I can think of one or two occasions where they've had the most Master Cicerones in the same room.
Yeah.
Because I think for Cicerone's 10-year anniversary, they invited all the Master Cicerones. Because I know Brian Reed said he went to that and a lot of people showed up to that. And then I think actually during the pandemic, I think they tried to get all the Master Cicerones in one room. The brewery in Placentia, I think, did a Zoom call, and they got a lot of people to show up to that. And so there was a lot of people on that Zoom call who were Masters.
That's very cool. So, yeah, okay, we're physically at the moment in SoCal, Southern California. How many are down here? Do you guys know?
Oh,
like just advanced?
Let's see. The two of us, Chris Leguzman at Pure Project.
Mm-hmm.
Our buddy Charlie Perez.
Yep.
Morgan. There's a woman named Morgan down here.
Okay. Yeah, I haven't met her.
Yeah.
I think she worked at Modern Times back in the day.
Yeah, I want to say
I only met her at the exam.
I want to say we looked at this and it was something like 7 or 8 because I think there was 15 or 16 in all of the state of California and they were relatively split.
All right.
Between...
So we could get it up to 4% if we try.
Yeah.
All right. Anyway, you're thirsty, so let's just get to the beer.
That felt like an insult.
Well, I mean, you said you
for
wanted...
beer. Yeah, thirsty for beer. Let's just be clear.
Right.
Thirsty for beer. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
just stop.
We don't
Stop with
need
this
water.
Thirsty for other stuff.
So
okay, just water.
So what we're going to end up doing here is going through some of the new BJCP changes. 2021 BJCP guidelines, style guidelines came out. We're going to talk changes. We're doing the first 10 right now. So that's like a bunch of lagery type stuff, German stuff, Czech stuff. So we just grabbed a few of those out of the fridge and I don't know, just grab one. And
yeah, we were feeling kind of light anyway. And in the spirit of some of the changes we'll talk about, we've got some urban roots and urban chestnut lagers, and I think we'll sip on those.
Keeping it real urban.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, we did fall.
All the my favorite chestnuts are the urban kind.
And my favorite roots.
Mm-hmm. So this is 10 degree. Let's just we don't need to open them all at once. Yeah. So we've got the 10 degree. It's called 10 degree. It is a Czech style lager, 3.9%.
Yeah, so
that's pretty awesome.
That's Czech pale lager territory for
I love that.
BJCP folks.
I love drinking a nice light lager that isn't gonna knock me out.
And it's you get this one's clocks in at 3.9% ABV, and it's just packed with flavor, and you don't get a lot of like that strength of Czech style lagers.
Not in the U.S.
And definitely not in the U.S.
It smells great. It smells real nice.
Yep, just smells like sauce hops.
Yeah, and sauce hops.
Kind of a relatively damp grass, dried mint.
Mm-hmm. Big, like, white bread.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Just huge. Like, you want to know what Pilsner malt smells like?
Yeah. And just like the flesh, like if you were to just cut off the crust, like that
right.
kind of absolutely.
Bread. Yeah, just the middle part of some, like, Wonder Bread.
Mm-hmm.
I got to get better at explaining Zaz because I've fallen into the trap. Maybe it's not a trap. Maybe it makes it cool. But, it's like Zaz is just like the constitutive element of hops in Czech, obviously. And people are just like, well, it's Zaz. You know it when you smell it.
Yes.
We were talking about this. We recorded some style comparisons earlier.
Yep.
And Scott and I were talking about, Pilsner malt and Saaz hops and some of these things that in the U.S., so these are just commonly found in beers that the whole point of the beer and the beauty of the beer is its subtlety. So it's not like your typical American craft beer that's like punching you in the face with an intense flavor profile that's kind of, frankly, easier to describe, right?
Yep.
So when you have like a light Pilsner type beer, sometimes it can be challenging to describe that beer, even though, you know, when you smell it, you're like, oh, that's Pilsner malt and that's Saaz hops. But like, you know, tell me what that smells like and tastes like. That becomes challenging. That becomes challenging. This is a real nice example, though.
Yes, this is phenomenal. Yeah, any Czech beer that you find that's by Urban Roots, it's just, in my book, it's an automatic buy. I don't need to...
Urban Roots out of Sacramento, California.
Absolutely.
Yep. Wonderful brewery.
Because we've tried their 10 degree, their 12 degree...
Their 11 degrees, like a half dark style. That's super yummy.
Yeah. So, and then we haven't seen Czech Dark from them. But yeah, you should just buy their Czech.
Do they make one?
Good question.
They do. Well, actually, this is, you know, we'll get to talk about a lot of the dark lager styles, but they make a dark lager called Nothing Is Certain, and I think that they pay homage to like the Moonlight Death and Taxes.
Oh, okay.
Like, so it's kind of like straddling a few different lager styles. I could be incorrect about that.
So it's a like Schwarz stout.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what I think of as Death and Taxes. Is,
wow.
Well, it has kind of warped Americans, a lot of craft beer drinking Americans' like idea of what a Schwarzbier is, because people call it a Schwarzbier, but it's like so much more roasty than a real Schwarzbier that it's clearly not a Schwarzbier.
Yeah.
It's more like a porter or a stout or something. And a great beer. I mean, I'm not like, obviously brewers don't give a shit about like brewing to style according to what the BJCP says.
Right.
The definition of any particular style is. They're just trying to make good beer that consumers will love. And so that's perfectly great and fine. It's a great beer.
Yeah, and if Schwarzbier just means black beer, it doesn't necessarily carry with it all of the historical connotations of the German versions if you don't want it to. You just like believe what the brewer communicates and sometimes just sit back and have it and it's going to be good for its own reasons.
Yeah. But I will say this. I think of, for instance, Kostritzer as like a poolside, just summer crusher, even though it's black in color. It's real easy drinking, and Death and Taxes it hits hard. Yeah,
there's like some people call Schwarzbier black Pilsner, and it's definitely that's like
what I think of it as.
Well, and it's, you know, the hoppier you get, the more it can kind of resemble that remark.
Fair. That's fair. Yes, I resemble that remark. All right, so what we're doing here is talking about what changes have occurred in the BJCP Style Guidelines with the new 2021 guidelines coming out. The changes have not been gigantic. We're going to try and zoom through them. So we did an earlier podcast episode where we talked, I think, so in depth about some of them that it took a really long time, and we decided to try and bang through them a little more quickly.
Yeah, we'll just give some of the highlights and
highlights.
The things that kind of stick out to us, or even if they're small, you know, we think have kind of like significant meaning in the change.
Right. And we were thinking, I'm not sure actually that you were in on this conversation, but you made a spreadsheet that shows all the changes to the commercial examples and the stats. And instead of like saying each and every one of them, I was thinking we could post those online and make them available to everyone for people who really want to nerd out and dig in like super deep.
Yeah, we'll reference some of them that are maybe bigger changes than people think, but yeah, we'll post that stuff so that you can comb through it with a little bit finer tooth comb whenever you want.
Right. If you're the kind of person who's like prepping for the master exam or something and you want to really get nerdy on it, then it'll be there for you.
Yeah, which is a good note too, because we're kind of in that in-between zone where comparing the 2015 and the 2021 guidelines makes some sense. It's fresh.
Yeah.
But a lot of both BJCP and Cicerone are going to start going by the 2021 guidelines around August, I think they said, of 2022.
Yep.
And so This is the fun time. This is like the window to compare them before we all forget about the 2015 guidelines.
Yeah, like it never existed.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is the moment. There's definitely going to be some people out there who are like about to sign up for an exam or are signed up for an exam that's just like after that date when things change over, and they're going to be worried about, shit, I need to memorize something new now. So we got you covered.
Yeah, so let's dive in.
Let's dive right in.
Yeah, so we're going to just start from the beginning of the BJCP styles, and that first section 1, is where a lot of the like super light American beers are.
Right.
And section 1A is American light lager. Not a ton of stuff to report. I do notice one theme I'll keep repeating quite a bit is that they seemed to have taken out like optional DMS aroma, for example, from a lot of the lager styles.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And so as we go through them and we're kind of counting how many those are, we can theorize whether that's like, is that kind of a legacy of, just maybe there were some bad examples that always had DMS back in the day, or it's like, now brewing has evolved and there are a bunch more of these styles and they really are kind of making the statement that they actually should not even have a low DMS character.
Right. If none of the examples have it, then why would you say this is optional? If all of them are not having them, then why not?
Yeah, I
just
mean, the
move
BJCP is always being responsive to what they're seeing pros do, right?
Absolutely.
So as beer styles evolve, they evolve their definitions. And also, the BJCP is an all-volunteer organization that's based in the United States. And, of course, they work with experts from other countries to make sure that their definitions are like correct. But ultimately, the truth of the matter is some of the people who are making the guidelines are tasting beers that are imported. And maybe those examples aren't always perfect.
True.
In the past, that was an issue. I don't think it is so much anymore, but maybe this is one of those kind of corrections.
Yeah. And the only other real like kind of qualitative change was that they mention that since American light lagers are sort of designed to have a lack of character in many respects, especially hop and malt character, that sometimes the only real way you can differentiate between them is the yeast character. And even though they're supposed to be, clean, kind of neutral fermenting beers, they, some might do like high gravity brewing and then dilute to certain strengths, so they're getting some subtle ester characters that you might not get if you just brewed it to strength to begin with. And so I thought that was interesting that they're like...
Well, they actually say that in there?
Yeah, they're just like considering that they're kind of designed not to have much hop or malt character at all. The way you can tell between some of the commercial examples is really just like small differences in yeast signature. Yeah.
Interesting.
And that's kind of only the substantive change. They didn't change style vital statistics for that one, and they did make one swap on commercial examples, which was they removed Keystone Light, which I don't know if they just did it because they wanted to add what they added, which was Grain Belt Premium Light.
Okay.
Which is kind of fun because I think that brand is owned by August Shell now, and so there's at least like one listed commercial example of American light lager that's not a macro beer by most definitions. And so, that's kind of a fun one if you're up Minnesota way. You could snag to compare to the other ones. But
very cool.
Yeah. American lager is 1B, and it's much of the same. It is, they removed the idea that light DMS is allowable in the aroma.
And tell us real quick about DMS.
So DMS, dimethyl sulfide, right, is a kind of a sulfur compound that, from a sensory perspective, I get that creamed corn thing.
Yep.
Yeah, and it's
so it's like when you get like a can of corn and you open it, right, you get that big whiff of the smell of canned corn.
Yeah, and it's a tough one because I think a lot of people know that, especially these styles are brewed with like corn sugar or corn syrup or rice syrup or whatever. And really that stuff all kind of ferments out.
Right.
That's not what DMS is. You're not going to taste corn syrup. Really.
That doesn't cause the DMS.
Yeah. So any kind of like, creamy corn character is actually from a precursor in malt.
Right.
And sounds relatively easy to diminish in your beer with like a good uncovered rolling boil. You know, it's super volatile. It just kind of blows off as you're boiling.
Right.
And so,
But the lighter your malt, the more of that precursor is in there. And these guys are using just 100%, well, not 100% because they're using a lot of adjuncts, but all of the malt that's in there is just like the palest possible malt. So there's tons of that precursor.
Yeah. So you almost have to maybe, you know, I don't know that much about brewing these beers, but maybe toe the line between, you know, blowing off all that DMS and keeping some of that light neutral character, you know. So maybe that's some of the impetus behind behind removing DMS as an option for a lot of these styles.
I mean, I don't drink those beers a ton, but to be fair, I can't say that usually when I do, I detect any DMS.
Yeah, not from the big breweries in particular, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, those guys are, I mean, they pretty much make perfect beer every time. Even if it's not the most exciting beer, it is technically kind of perfect.
Yeah. They did add old style to this category, which I think used to be in another category.
Cream ale.
Yeah, it was in cream ale, which, not to get too off topic, but tracks with the way brewers are entering competition categories, I think. Like some of them are entering like their Mexican style lagers in the cream ale category, or their cream ale in like a lighter lager category. And it's just, you know, there's probably a middle point on the Venn diagram of a lot of those lighter styles that means they have the flexibility to kind of enter it in a category that they want. But it is a little bit funny watching like GABF results roll in, for example. Right. And it's like I don't know if this is a specific example, but it'll be like Ska's Mexican Lager won gold in the cream ale category.
Right. Yeah, no, totally. And that kind of takes us right back around to what I was saying about death and taxes, which is the brewers are just making beers they think everyone will love. They don't care about brewing to what the BJCP says is, you know, the style guideline.
Right. Yeah. And then they did... I do want to mention the vital statistics change here because they changed the SRM from 2 to 4 as a range on American Lager to 2 to 3.5.
That's ridiculous.
So they've added a half SRM, which is kind of a double-edged sword, right? It's like that seems arbitrary in some sense. Why not round it out? You know, like there's not a single American Lager that's at 4 SRM. I bet there like maybe is. But the other side of that sword is like the half SRMs, if you're studying for an exam, are easier to remember.
They really are.
Right. Because they're finite and they're weird.
I think that's only I think that makes 3 SRM ranges that contain, or 4 actually. Yeah, I think that contain a half. Yeah, I think it's Kölsch, triple, cream ale are the 3, and then now I think American Lager then.
Dude is a machine.
So, yeah. He hasn't lost a single step.
No.
I appreciate you guys.
He, both these guys just very recently passed the Advanced Cicerone exam, and they're real dialed. I passed in like 1920.
Yeah. I passed it feels like 3 minutes ago. So if I say something wrong, you know, type a comment, I would really appreciate it.
Yeah. Cohen was very relieved that he didn't have to study once the Great Depression hit. Right. He was glad he got that done. So.
Right. I couldn't afford beer back then. It was 2017 though. Yeah. I took the second ever Advanced Cicerone exam that they gave. I did have to redo the tasting, but I took it just 2 months later and passed because I did feel like that had just been a fluke. I had a bad day. I retook it, passed. And I got the notification in January of 2017.
Very cool.
So I've been doing this for a while.
We'll get you. You'll be back. You'll be back.
Yeah.
You'll be back in no time.
Yep.
He's the grizzled veteran at the table.
That's right. That's right.
I'll come rushing back.
That's right.
Okay. Let's stop talking about how old I am.
Yeah. Let's move to new changes in the VJCP again. But yeah, one sees the next one. That's cream ale. and we already kind of hinted that they made some commercial example changes there. They did. They've robbed you of one of your half SRMs.
Oh,
so it used to be 2.5 to 5,
so
and now we're down to 2 to 5.
So back to 3.
Yeah, we're back at equilibrium
right.
on half SRMs, and it might change again later. But not much change to cream ale, really. They just kind of they really simplified and pared down the history section, which I feel like they did across the board in a lot of spots, because it's, especially the BJCP guidelines are designed as to help define the contours of entering beers into competition. So the fact that, cream ale had a particular history is not exactly relevant to that, but it is cool to know that so that you can kind of trace the evolution of it and tinker with your recipes if you're a home brewer.
It's nice to get a couple notes just for some kind of context. I know that they had all of their historical information reviewed by Ron Pattinson, a famous beer historian from England. Very cool guy. Had the pleasure of meeting him once. Cool dude. Really knows his stuff. And but yeah, I think they're trying to make the guidelines a little more streamlined.
Yeah, more streamlined and more succinct just across the board. And I think some of that efficiency that has been built into the 2021 guidelines is either just for efficiency's sake, or hopefully we can kind of tease out why a couple of examples might have happened,
We need to play it like a song backwards.
Yes.
And try to hear the demons talk to us.
I thought don't they explicitly instruct us not to do that?
They do. They say if you try to understand, I don't have the quote, but they basically say if you try to tease out information, read between the lines, play a record backward, that if you're trying to do that, you're doing it wrong. It does say that.
Yeah, there's no secret meaning behind the BJCP guidelines. They're just trying to communicate what the beer's about.
They are, yeah.
The kind of the sections that I'm going over, there were not very many changes to style comparisons, but this one they did add blonde and Kölsch as comparisons to cream ale. Which we've just kind of found is something that the Cicerone program in particular is doing a lot, is stressing style comparison, whether through tasting or just kind of academically, what are the differences between these two styles. Right. So if the BJCP adds some additional styles to compare to cream ale, that's something to take note of for sure.
Sure.
Yeah. Which I really like. I really like that they're doing, because I think that's when you think of what's the most common question from a consumer. What's the difference between X and Y, ale versus lager, IPA versus hazy IPA. So I think putting a lot of focus on that is really good.
Right. Yeah. I mean, one thing that I guess not everyone knows right out of the gate. So looking at the guidelines, you get this idea that there's these hard lines between these styles, when in reality, there's all these overlapping styles, overlapping in terms of color, in terms of strength, in terms of flavor profiles, and this and that. And so getting context to be able to really understand how they are different and where the sort of giant series of Venn diagrams all come together and come apart is really a key element of learning about beer. Yeah.
So
also, by the way, did you notice that if you look at the third letter of every word I'm just kidding.
We got any changes to commercial examples or anything?
The next podcast episode, we will get out the Ouija board.
Yeah, for our offshoot. The Beer Scholar Horror Hour.
Right.
So, yeah, that's cream ale. 1D is American wheat beer. There's not a whole lot to report. They did add a commercial example, but they didn't change vital statistics or anything. But I thought it was funny, literally almost the only change to the qualitative descriptions was that they added a reference to Anchor Brewing having brewed one in 1984. And I was like, someone in the extended Maytag family just wrote a sternly worded letter to the BJCP or something. Why did they take such special care to fix that one thing?
That is strange. We should ask Gordon Strong.
Yeah. But yeah, that's category 1. Pretty simple changes. Category 2 in BJCP is kind of a range of international lagers. 2A is international pale lager. And they're, I thought they added a half SRM, but they just slightly changed the ABV. But they removed some like optional yeast character discussion from aroma and removed the reference to DMS not being a fault again. So I think they're just kind of like saying almost across the board that all these lager styles are pretty much brewed to have as clean of a fermenting character as possible. 2B is International Amber Lager, and they didn't change much here either. They did the same thing with DMS, take out the references to DMS and off flavors, and they just sort of say, maybe some light fermentation character and nothing specific. They added to the flavor section this idea that lower bitterness examples can come off as sweeter. And I felt like they've taken care to kind of like walk that tightrope of the difference between how a beer actually finishes or tastes versus like the perception of sweetness or bitterness in isolation. And so I think they're just saying the like super low IBU or super low bitterness ones can taste pretty sweet. But it definitely has felt in the past like International Amber Lager is sort of a catch-all for amber lagers that aren't any of the other amber lagers.
Right.
So there is kind of a wide...
Do you remember like one or two of those? I can't even really
the
think
international
of any.
amber examples, like Dos Equis amber.
The old ones, the old list was Capital Brewing Winter Skull, Dos Equis amber.
Dos Equis, yeah.
Shell's Oktoberfest was in this category.
That was the other one.
Yingling.
Oh, right.
And Brooklyn Lager.
Yingling still in there? In Brooklyn?
Yeah.
Those are great. Those are great beers.
Brooklyn Lager. I don't know, man. Brooklyn Lager.
Well, that's why it's such a good or illustrates how it's a catch-all category.
Yeah.
Because
Right.
Brooklyn Lager doesn't taste anything like Yingling.
It's true.
And it's kind of like the hoppy standout of the bunch. To me.
And we've had people who are studying for advanced just have that fully blind, and they're just like, this is a great best bitter. A lot more. And I ended up putting it on one of their practice exams as kind of the one that's got to be really hard. Like you got to earn it if you're going to get the 5 out of 5. And it's, I don't know, man. International Amber, that's a tough sell for me.
Yeah. Well, and it's certainly not something you're going to see on like the certified level.
Right.
Yeah. They did the commercial examples. They took out the Capital beer and the Shell's beer. Okay. Because those felt like pretty hyper regional.
Yeah. I don't want to dig in on every commercial example. I was just sitting here thinking like, what even are those? Like,
Yeah. That's my take. It's amber lagers that don't fit another amber lager category.
Right.
And that might be like a crude way to cut it, but that's what it reads
it's
like
not the worst way.
Yep. Fair enough. Oh, let's open another beer.
Yeah.
You're talking a lot, so you're still full, but
yeah, that's a good point. Here, I will pass off. Why don't we just go?
Should we go Zwickel?
Yeah, I think so.
Down the line here.
We looked up what Zwickel is all about as a term the other day. What remind me? It's
the Zwickel is like literally the sample port.
Oh right, that's right.
Oh.
Yeah.
So the Zwickel is the sort of unfiltered right out of the tank beer.
Yeah, like some breweries now use it interchangeably with Keller beer, like Zwickel beer or Keller beer.
Right.
It referenced the serving method historically, not really the style. It was just like you were drinking young
Any
lager
beer
off the
could
tank.
be a Zwickel in theory.
Yeah.
Like you could have a Zwickel IPA.
Yeah. I don't see why not.
Yeah. Another lovely beer from Urban Chestnut. All right, go ahead.
That's okay. 2C was International Dark. There's virtually nothing to report. They did remove the kind of corn and DMS references in aroma. Switched a couple of examples, and then they did. I think it's important to highlight that they changed the SRM from 14 to 22 to 14 to 30. It's like 14 to 22 felt to be like just short of some of the darkest examples of international dark lager.
Absolutely.
And so that I like those clues when you're thinking about studying these beers, because then what the new SRM range is, for example, kind of squarely helps you visualize what the range of the color is, which is cool. But yeah, if you're looking to grab an international dark lager, this is also sort of like darker lagers that don't fit into Munich Dunkel or Schwarzbier or whatever. They're kind of like bigger mass-produced dark lagers like St. Pauli Girl Dark or San Miguel Shiner Bock. Stuff like that.
Lived in Texas for a bit and drank a bunch of that.
The next category, we start the Czech beers, which I'm still sipping on Czech style beer. Yeah. So I'm in line over here. And they start with the pale stuff. 3A is Czech Pale Lager, which is what this Urban Roots would fall under, I think. Right? 3.9.
Very much so.
Just like super squarely. I'm definitely not going to give rundowns of the commercial example changes. Because
I want to hear you pronounce.
You won't even know what beer I'm trying to pronounce.
Even Czech people won't know what beer you're talking about.
Yeah. The only thing I can, I can guarantee is that Notch Session Pills is still a Czech Pale Lager. And so that's the easiest one to pronounce. And it's also extremely delicious. But they didn't really make, I was talking with Chris earlier, the most substantial changes that the BJCP has made to the Czech category seem to happen between the 2008 and 2015 versions.
Right.
So they didn't have to clean up a ton of stuff here.
Right. The 2008 BJCP Czech section was kind of a mess. It was like clear that they didn't really have a Czech person who was an expert to help them figure that stuff out. And someone must have said something about that, because 2015 was like huge changes.
Yeah, just completely different.
Yeah.
3B is Czech Premium Pale Lager, where your Pilsner Urquell sits comfortably. So beers that are definitely in that vein. And they made one, it might seem like a small change to most people, but I absolutely love it. They said, this category used to say that there were low fruity hop-derived esters.
Oh, God.
And it was just like so confusing. It's like when we're talking about beer, we restrict like ester descriptions to yeast character, usually, and it was like there are these random spots in the old version of the BJCP where they would refer to hop esters or malt esters, and I think it was just like unnecessarily confusing. And so they kept the language that some low ester character is optional, but they nixed that hop derived language, which is nice.
Well, when you're tasting a beer and you get a certain characteristic, sometimes it's practically impossible to tell where exactly it came from.
Yeah.
Right? Like when you're judging homebrew, you don't want to, they teach you this if you have a good teacher, just say what you're tasting. And if you're giving them feedback, don't assume you know where that flavor comes from unless it's really obvious, because you're probably going to say something to that homebrewer in your feedback that the homebrewer's going to see and say, I didn't do that. This guy doesn't know what they're talking,
Yeah. 3C is Czech Amber Lager and 3D is Czech Dark Lager. There are just virtually no changes to the flavor and aroma descriptors, etc. They did, for Czech Dark Lager, they kept Ufleku, which seems to be the prototypical example that almost everybody bases it off of, and Budvar Dark. But they literally changed all four of the other ones. Mm-hmm. So you got to go check that out on your own so that I don't butcher the pronunciations back to back.
And Notch still just has one Czech beer.
Well,
all of the commercial examples for all of these.
In later categories, we'll see that I think they kind of tried to include some American interpretations that are super safe, but they took out Notch's Czech Dark Lager as an example. I wonder if they just haven't brewed it frequently enough for them to feel comfortable including it. Right. I don't know what the true motivation is, but they are just like traditionalists to the extreme at Notch, so you could feel totally safe drinking that to get a good idea of what Czech Dark Lager tastes like.
I don't understand why they don't have one under each of these, but
Notch
digress.
Notch just isn't available to most people, so
that's true. And it does seem like
there's all the Czech ones. Those are super those are like really, you know, like to me that's the thing. To me, that's not a good enough reason.
Well, from where we're sitting in
Sure.
the U.S. and California, yeah, it's
fair.
That's our perspective.
Yeah.
It seems like there's a little bit of a Czech style dark lager revival in the U.S. though.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and I
Absolutely.
can't think of like a big craft brewery that has done it, but keep your eye out, because I know
happen.
like Dovetail in Chicago, Urban Roots in Sacramento, obviously Notch still makes all incredible Czech beer. So those are hyper regional. You can only get them there.
Yeah, Wild Provisions, Colorado.
Yeah, exactly. So keep an eye out and taste a bunch and judge for yourself whether they meet the category.
Right.
Yeah, so those are the Czech lagers in that category. Section 4 starts some of the pale German style lagers. Mm-hmm. Starts with Munich Helles at 4A. This, again, we're turning into a repetitive theme, but they took out the like low DMS notes as being optional, so they just kind of nixed that. They used to describe, I think this is just one of the moves for efficiency, but I really like what they took out. They used to describe this as a well-attenuated Pils malt showcase, which I've definitely stolen that language. That's just like what I think Munich Helles is.
I literally said that earlier today.
He quoted that same thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, so they obviously just take that out.
They took that out?
They took that language out. It was just such a pretty way to describe Helles, I think.
It's a showcase for Pilsner malt.
But, you know, they didn't change like the description of the ingredients or anything. So
1 star.
Well, yeah.
Would not buy again.
And they did add Schonrammer Hell and a couple of other Schonrammer beers, which I really are just incredible German made beers. So Festbier, honestly, not a whole lot to report except that they added that they may be called a Helles Märzen, which I think is kind of a cool way to think about or to remember the history of Märzen, which wasn't always locked into being an amber style. It was a strength category, 100 whatever years ago. And so if you call something a Helles Märzen, it's just like a pale lager in that strength category, which is neat.
Yeah, that is cool.
Yeah. Make sure there's no crazy style or vital statistics changes. Nah, that seems totally reasonable. Helles Bock is 4C. Again, they removed the DMS optional character. They added, in the flavor descriptors of the malt, they added doughy, which bugs me.
Seriously?
Yeah. They have like all the normal kind of like grainy malt character, but just added doughy, which is such a flag for wheat.
Yeah,
for
exactly.
me.
Usually when you say that uncooked dough and flour and stuff, you're getting into wheat categories.
Yeah. And I wonder if what they're getting at is that's a bigger bodied lager, and so maybe some of the like creaminess of that body character can confuse that, but then it's just that confusing because it's not really doughy.
It sounds like we need to go get some Helles Bocks and recalibrate.
Yeah. Or more brewers need to make them too.
That too.
Yeah, amen to that.
They used to say in the history in this category that there was like some, I can't remember if it was the history of the comments section, but there was some debate as to whether or not, sort of historically speaking, Helles Bock and Maibock are identical.
Right.
And they seem to wash their hands of that debate in the new guidelines. They're just like, yeah, it's the same as Maibock. So
it certainly is these days.
they either settled the debate with some research or they decided not to deal with it.
Right. Well, every time they make any change to the BJCP, like many people get angry. It happens every single time.
People care.
People care. Yeah.
They did, that used to be a 6 to 11 SRM situation, and it's 6 to 9.
Which one's this?
Helles Bock.
Helles Bock, yeah.
6 to 9 now, which I think is fair.
I think
Like
that's-
Helles is getting, 11 SRM is getting fairly dark for,
Yeah. I like that change.
a beer that's called Helles, which means, bright.
Right.
And they added, this is the first time I think that they added they added Hofbräu beers to a couple of sections. And so if Hofbräu Maibock makes it to the U.S.,
it definitely
that would be one to
It definitely does.
to
Yeah.
snag.
I saw it this season.
That's how you pronounce that one? Hofbräu?
Yeah, with the little upsilon on top for those. Yeah, so Lowenbräu, Hofbräu.
Oh, okay. I think I always said brow.
That's what I did too until Rich Higgins explained a lot of that in one of his podcasts.
He knows a few things about German beer.
That's why I kind of took that one to the bank. Yeah,
that's great.
Yeah, I wish I could repeat it as succinctly as he did, but he on the Liquid Bread podcast has a very quick description of when to set when brow is pronounced brow or broy.
Okay.
And I can't remember if it was regional or just by brewery or whatever. But
got it. So some of them are actually brows, but
yeah. So you're not wrong.
Okay. Well, I am, but also just Rich Higgins, one of the 20 Master Cicerones and one of the earlier ones, learned to brew in Germany.
And has traveled there extensively.
Yes. And used to run like trips for groups of beer nerds there and stuff. So he knows some things.
So that's the end of section 4. Section 5 starts with German Leichtbier, which is just like their like version of, Coors Light, Bud Light.
You mean licked beer?
It looks like it's spelled liked beer. Let's say liked beer. We like this beer.
Yeah, it's fair.
But past tense, we liked that one. But not anymore.
Yeah.
Well, that's a relevant grammatical change because they scrapped all the commercial examples and added 5 new ones.
Oh man.
It's a little bit pointless for us sitting in the United States because they just don't export any of these. Why would you export your super light beer?
Even stronger, similar beers show up and they're like not.
They're struggling.
They're struggling. Yeah. So
they do make the mention for Leichtbier that they added this language that they've been supplanted by non-alcoholic beer and radlers pretty much. So the market for the light beers must be being replaced by just non-alcoholic beers completely.
Brutal.
Yeah. 5B is Kölsch, one of my faves, and a ton of changes. They kept all the stats the same, and they just added 1 commercial example, and we're lucky to be able to get 3 or 4 pretty easily in most places that have a good import selection in the U.S., so you can continue to drink those. The trick is obviously that even the BJCP takes pains to describe how delicate the style is, and so if you're drinking one that's hopped over the pond 6, 7, 8 months ago, it's, it could be a little rough.
Right.
But that's why Cologne is on near the top of my bucket list for beer experiences that I have not been able to do yet.
Same. So. Beer Scholar holiday party trip.
Oh my gosh. All right.
All we have to do is start making money.
All right.
Yes. Make some money and book it.
Right.
I'll label the swear jar. We'll get funds going.
Yeah. We just end up paying for our own trip little by little.
Exactly.
I curse a lot. There would still need to be a big punishment every time.
If you say so, okay.
They did make a bunch of changes in the description to Kölsch, though. Some small, some big, but they took out... They used to say that some Kölsch strains of yeast gave off like a sulfury or winey character, and they took that out.
Winey? It used to say winey?
Yeah, WHINY, I believe. Yeah, whiny.
It has a complaining character to it. Yeah.
Oh, no wonder I hate Kölsch.
Yeah.
It hates you too.
Yeah.
So.
That's why I complain all the
time.
Yeah. So they took that out and just concentrate on that light kind of apple pear character. They added that it should have a soft, rounded palate. Which is a battle in a lot of these light styles, which is it crisp? Is it soft? Is it round?
Yeah.
Is
smooth.
it, smooth? Yeah, what is it? This is interesting. They added Vienna malt as a possible ingredient. And while they still mention wheat malt as a possibility, they kind of mention that that's not super popular, and they took out, used to say up to 20%. And I think people must not be using it all that much because they took 20% out. That seems like a lot for a Kölsch, I guess.
Interesting.
And then the last change was, I kind of mentioned this already, but they still stress how delicate it is. That's kind of like the overall impression is how delicate it is. The really balanced character in all the aroma and flavor sections and stuff like that. So that's why it remains the top of my list to experience true Kölsch.
Yeah.
Hopefully sooner rather than later.
Is I've always called the glassware a sponge. Is that correct? Do you know?
I've heard it pronounced as Stange.
Stange.
Yeah.
Oh, I like that
and
more.
I believe that was also from
Stange.
Masters. I can't remember if that was Neil on Tasting Together for Kölsch or something, but pretty sure, I don't know.
It's funny. These are all words that you know, as a person at our level who reads all these books about beer, it's like I've read these words a million times. I haven't spoken them out loud a whole lot, or at least not to someone who knew enough to correct me. So I'm enjoying this. Stange.
And you only need to be corrected by someone that really knows what they're talking about once.
Right.
And then you remember it forever. But since we don't have a definitive answer, don't take our word for it.
You know.
Look into that one on.
Okay. All right.
That's what I would go with if forced
Yeah. Well, it sounds like we just need to go
to guess, but yeah. Yes, that would be great.
Yeah.
Hear it at the bar.
And just ask, what is this? Yeah.
Yeah.
I have a lot of hot takes about Kölsch that I need to resolve anyway.
Boy,
so a trip would help that.
All right. Sounds like a future episode.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right.
5C is German Helles Exportbier. You could shorten that to kind of colloquially like a Dortmunder or Dortmunder export style. They took out sulfur and DMS as options from this one. They kind of expanded on mouthfeel by eliminating the language of crisp and saying it's more mellow with the possibility of some low alcohol warmth. And I think they did this for a couple of the lager styles that have a little bit more of a mineral-y character to them, is they kind of like, they stopped describing that as sulfury necessarily and just saying it can have an optional like higher mineral character to it.
Interesting.
Yeah. They also eliminated the ingredients list. Used to say that some breweries use adjuncts and hop extracts, and they just took that out. So I don't know if that's an appeal to tradition a little bit or what, but and then they added some that I think you can get your hands on, which is nice. So I wanted to mention that because usually before it was only Dab.
Right.
Dab Original was kind of like the only one I could ever find that falls under this category that the BJCP explicitly references because...
no dab jokes.
Yeah. And then they added Chuckanut's Dortmunder Lager. So if you're in the Northwest. And then they added... This is where they added another Schönraumer beer, Schönraumer Gold.
Where are those guys?
Germany.
Oh, okay.
I don't know exactly which part, but I do know that they're brewmasters from Wyoming.
Oh, cool.
So
That's
we have
random.
that link.
Very cool.
That's our in. Yeah. If we ever,
Yeah, we need to call that guy up. Get the tour.
5D is German Pils. So I think that's a favorite of a lot of people. It took out sulfur and DMS as options. They're just like cleaning up all the lagers.
What about, so, a lot of lagers, it's like as soon as you pop it, before you even pour it, you take a quick whiff, you get like just that touch of sulfur. Is your impression that is, they're saying maybe that's not okay? Or is it like more like once it's poured, you shouldn't get any more?
You know what my read is that they were tired of towing the line between describing what too much sulfur character is. Because if you talk to anybody that makes a prototypical German style Pils, they really like that, just that little match strike character.
Totally.
It's just kind of there and then blows off a little bit.
I definitely think of it as part of that beer style.
Yeah, well, and I think brewers, like I've seen videos of Bill at Bierstadt Lagerhaus where they're literally trying to build in just that smidge of that character. Shouldn't be a sulfur bomb by any means, obviously, but so I think that they're just like, that's such a either integral or like momentary component of it that they just felt okay taking sulfur out.
Let me just say this debate, if it's a debate, I don't know if it's a debate, reminds me of maybe it was Jester King that was saying like, we like putting our lambics and goozes in green bottles because we want a touch of skunkiness. That's part of the style. I don't know. Sounds to me kind of like that in a weird way.
Yeah.
All right, we're back. Slight technical difficulties there. We're back. Everything's cool. Don't panic. We're talking German Pilsner.
German Pils, and we were on the subject of that just kiss of sulfur character, I think. And we probably settled the debate for all time anyway. So
Yes, there's really nothing left to talk about.
If it was a debate at all.
Let's just end this podcast.
The only other a couple things to say about German Pils. The only other qualitative thing was the description used to waffle between like whether or not German Pils can have a softer kind of malt accented character or like a super dry bitter finish. And I think for the purposes of the description, they just lean into the latter a little bit in 2021. And they still kind of make the historical distinction between some of the Southern German and Northern German Pils that is like in the information that is about. But I think they're like, for most intents and purposes, it's like dry, nice and firmly bitter.
Right.
There aren't a whole lot of examples that I would now call soft and malt finished in the way that it used to describe it.
Interesting.
It sounds like Helles to me.
Really cool thing in this category for commercial examples real quick is that they added a bunch of cool stuff, but they added Bierstadt slow pour pills.
And that's the first American example in that category, right?
Well, no, they used to.
Oh, no, they have Trümmer, right?
They listed, Trümmer's German and American, I guess. But then
right.
they used to have left-hand Polestar pills, but they discontinued that beer a long time ago.
Yeah,
so there wasn't a really
great switch,
a distinctly American interpretation that you could just go grab.
Right.
I mean, luckily, it's not hard to get even imported German Pilsners in general. But adding Bierstadt's cool because it's like they're taking great pains to be as traditional as possible, and it's not obviously super widely available, but if you're close to Denver at all, or can
if you're
get
going to
to
GABF, you're stopping by.
Yeah, exactly.
And so, wait, the side pool would seem to refer to like a Czech side pool.
No, slow pour.
Slow pour. Oh, okay, never mind.
Yeah. They just do the build the foam thing.
Got it.
Yeah, and they added Rathaus Pils, which is a favorite of mine, and then Jever, which I was kind of surprised wasn't in the 2015 examples. That's most people's interpretation of like that northern, super dry, quite bitter version. So that's kind of fun.
Cool.
That's the most of the pale lagers, actually. It goes to some of the amber ones next, starting with 6A Märzen. And Märzen really has no qualitative updates. It's the same. They made it a little bit more efficient. The Märzen they added is called Hofmark Märzen, and I've never heard of that. But they kept all the other examples. So obviously we have an explosion of that category in September every year. So that's usually pretty easy to get a hold of. And quick note about Märzen, if you're studying too, if you're taking the exam, any exam off Märzen season, don't rely on the fact that they might not stick one there, because what is it? Paulaner Märzen is year round, basically.
Paulaner Oktoberfest Märzen is year round.
Yeah. So, don't discount the seasonality of some things, or don't use seasonality as a discount of some things. 6B is Rauchbier.
Yay.
Another favorite. I should just say they're all favorites. I love all the beer styles equally.
That's not true.
They added they added a little thing about how Rauchbier is a little darker than Märzen, which is a nice little point of comparison. But they added a full paragraph about the quality of the smoke character. They used to kind of make some distinctions that it shouldn't be like ashy or
greasy,
greasy and all of that, and they still do. They say all of those things. But it's its own paragraph within flavor, and they say things like, that like that meaty ham or bacon character is okay, as long as it's not greasy again. And I just thought that was interesting that they, instead of kind of like interweaving a little bit of that what is quality smoke versus not character in the previous examples, they just came out and said like, quality smoke character is really important.
That's cool. That's interesting. I'm gonna have to check that out. Have you guys ever had a Rauchbier that you would describe as like greasy?
Well, so this is my. I don't think I'm gonna be in the minority here. I don't think many Rauchbiers are even that meaty. that ham or bacon.
I would agree.
And this is probably like a, I've been vegetarian for forever at this point.
Right.
And so it's like the smell of those meats, it does have like they're fatty for one,
Right.
and beer's fat free. So that it doesn't have that associated like unctuous smell of like
Right.
fatty meat. So it smells like campfire or smoked wood to me for the most part.
Yeah, because Slinko is 100% beechwood.
Yep.
And that's campfire. The only one that I will say that definitely has that meat character is the Big Meat from Enegren Brewing. And that is their smoked Doppelbock. And that is definitely ham and cured meats. And that's when I would take it to the bank. That if someone said, I want one that tastes like meats, the Big Meat.
Okay.
Well, and it's a good reminder that for BJCP, for entering beers in this category, they're basically describing a smoked Märzen. They're not describing a smoked Helles. They're not describing a smoked Doppelbock. This category is smoked Märzen, essentially.
Right.
And so, yeah, some people may smell those beers and get ham or bacon. That's not wrong. Yeah. I'm just saying the reason they don't smell like that to me is the very reason they say it shouldn't smell greasy. And that's kind of like it. Those meats smell, they give me the interpretation of smelling fattiness, unctuousness that I don't get in the beer. So
makes sense.
6C is Dunkles Bock. No big qualitative changes here. They just kind of increase the efficiency of the description. This one's a little bit of a bummer because not a lot of people, these are hard to get a hold of.
Yep.
And so that's the bummer. They added Schell's Bock, which is nice if you're in the Midwest, but they took off New Glarus Bock. And I don't know if Great Lakes is making Rockefeller Bock anymore, but they took that off. So, you just got to keep an eye out for your local breweries making one.
Yeah, and let us know. I'd love to try one.
Yeah, no joke.
Yeah.
What's fun is that so many regions are getting really good breweries that are going back to traditional styles.
Right.
All of the expansiveness of all the contemporary innovations are still there. You can still drink a dozen styles at your local brewery that aren't even in the BJCP.
Yep.
But the likelihood is increasing that you're going to stumble across something like a Dunkles Bock.
Definitely down with this rising popularity of lagers in the craft scene. Yeah.
100%.
It's fun.
Category 7 is kind of the rest of the amberish beers, and 7A is Vienna Lager. They didn't really change any of the I think they maybe added a commercial example or something. A lot more breweries seem to be making Vienna style lagers, which is nice. They did, in the description, they changed flavor. In flavor, they used to call it a crisp finish, and they changed it to a soft finish. So it's like changing one word can have a pretty dramatic.
Seems like a very big difference.
Dramatic
huge.
difference.
Yeah.
And they also they used to have this kind of longer diatribe about how Mexican interpretations, are kind of like loosely based on, the
traditional old school version of this beer.
Yeah, and just the migration of Austrian people to Central America and kind of
and those brewers just kept
exporting the style there.
Right.
But they just more succinctly now say that, hey, a lot of amber lagers basically of any cultural origin use adjuncts and extracts and stuff, and so they're only very loosely based on, the most traditional Vienna lagers.
For sure, yeah.
7B is Altbier, and they kind of like took out most of the in-text allusions to it being a top fermented but cold conditioned beer. It pulled it out into an italicized intro into just that beer style.
Huh.
Yeah, so it's italicized intro that's just like, hey, this is a top fermented cold conditioned beer. It warms my heart because I think that opening paragraph kind of clarifies that it's more complicated than it's an ale.
Right.
Because a lot of people equate top fermenting yeast with just that's ale yeast, so it's an ale.
Right.
And
it's a hybrid. That's what it
Yeah,
used to be.
hybrid
It used to
or
be called hybrid.
Oh, boy.
I just don't. I've never heard an actual German person, a Dusseldorfian, say that it's an ale.
Right.
The English make ale. We don't. It's just Altbier.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And it's similar thing is true for Kölsch. But so that's kind of nice. They do later call it an ale, so they're tugging at my heartstrings in both directions a little bit.
There you go.
They took out that light sulfury character, but stressed the possibility of an increased minerality. Increased minerality, including kind of like some sulfate character.
Okay.
So I think they're just making a small adjustment that the bitterness and the kind of the water character too can be a little more snappy.
Yep.
And harsh. So, or harsh might be the wrong language, but I've heard that too, having not been to Dusseldorf and had traditional alt beer, that it's like quite firmly bitter at the source.
Yep.
By the time we get them here from Germany, they're a shadow of their former selves.
Right. Yeah. You don't see them around too often.
No.
7C is Kellerbier, and it moved. It's in historical beer. And so everything in the historical beer category is a little bit more succinct. They didn't really change all that much of the information, but it's no longer under this like section 7 area, but it's the same. They still talk about pale and dark Kellerbier. And I guess the idea just remains that it's kind of an unfiltered, roughly German style lager. I used to joke that I think that like some American interpretations, they call their lager that they didn't actually lager a Kellerbier.
Right. They make a lager, don't actually lager.
Yeah, didn't quite clear up the way they had thought, and they're like, we'll just serve it from the tank, Kellerbier. Let's do it.
And that's one we were talking when we cracked the Zwickel beer.
Right.
That Kellerbier was historically just more about the serving method. It was served from the Keller, from the cellar.
This is what I've never understood about that being a BJCP style is I always just thought, isn't this kind of just a technique?
Yeah.
That can be applied to other beer styles?
Yes.
But I don't know, whatever.
I think it is.
I think this is one of those things where we need to go to Germany and like figure out what's going on.
Yeah. And it's nice now that it's...
fine, we'll go to Germany.
Yeah. Okay, you will.
All right, fine.
But having moved to historical, I think that kind of illustrates that whatever we're calling it now, it kind of lacks whatever historical meaning that it had.
Right.
So now it can exist as this artifact in the historical
It's
beer
sort of
category.
like on probation.
Yeah. Everyone do this more correctly and we'll put it back.
Right.
8, category 8 starts with 8A Munich Dunkel. One of my absolute favorites.
Yes.
And I really actually love a very tiny change that they made. They stopped using the phrase malt sweetness, and they changed it to malt richness, which whatever qualms you may have with richness as a useful category or not, it at least does denote that it's not necessarily a sweet finishing beer.
Right.
Because richness doesn't necessarily equate to sweetness.
Yeah.
You can have rich, non-sweet foods, for example. So I thought that was like a cool, just the tiniest change, because Munich Dunkel shouldn't be cloying. It shouldn't be like super sweet finishing. It can give you the impressions of some of that, but it
takes it from a flavor to more of a mouthfeel comment.
Yeah. And they took out, I didn't even realize this was in there, but they used to have a reference to unfiltered examples being like liquid bread and super yeasty.
Yeah.
So I guess Keller Dunkel.
That's right.
On that subject. But they just took that out because that's obviously if that's so far removed from what Dunkel has become in the most filtered and most lagered examples, then it's not really a relevant footnote.
Right.
Fair.
And they added, this was the other category, they added Hofbräu beer too. And you can get that Dunkel in a ton of places. And so that's kind of a good one to pick up and revisit if you haven't in a while.
So they got added to a bunch of categories.
I think 2 or 3.
Yeah, Hofbräu is, they
good for them.
Got some love. It's deserved. And like Chris said, they're so well distributed. It's good for folks studying.
It's good for Americans studying for Cicerone exams.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
They did a slight SRM change on it too. Dunkel used to be 14 to 28, and now it's 17 to 28.
Oh man, that's
So, were you hoping it was rounded a little better?
no.
or?
I wouldn't have changed it. It was always easy because you could just double 14
Yeah.
to 28.
Well, no longer.
You're going to have to adjust your memory, Palace.
Yeah, I know.
Do you think 17 as the floor is more accurate despite your...
Oh, definitely. Yeah, I would say.
Reservation.
I would say it's. I wouldn't say I've seen one that's below like 22. I think I wouldn't hate it if they said 20 to 28. Right. I don't think that would be out of the realm of possibility for.
I need to get to the point where I can just call SRMs.
Just
You will.
That's like your magic power. You're just like superpower. That's
No, I'm
5.5.
actually not that bad at it, but
and I was like, if it's a superpower, pick a different one. It's
yeah, right.
not many other good uses.
The next category is 8B Schwarzbier. And they only really made like 2 changes to the descriptions. They took out that sulfur optionality again, and we've just been theorizing the whole time about what the real motivation for that is. Because obviously you can get a little bit of sulfur character out of some
Absolutely,
Schwarzbier. And then they took out a sentence in the history section, I think, about how it has served as inspiration for black lagers brewed in Japan. And I think the idea is like, well, has it not just served as inspiration for all black lagers brewed since?
Yeah, I would hope so. Yeah.
Right.
You know, not to say that they're all distinct or they're all exactly like Schwarzbier, but it's like that seems like the template. Start at Schwarzbier,
Right.
and make your regional or brewer
That's interesting.
specific
I
decisions from there.
wonder what Japanese beers are talking about. Sounds like we need to go to Japan now too.
Well, is it like Asahi Black, like some of those like international
Is that which
style
one is?
big,
Is that which one is?
big,
Yeah.
big batch dark lagers? I'm not sure.
I don't know that beer.
I'm not super
I don't know that
familiar.
beer.
All right. I wanted to mention some of the commercial example changes here because they added 2 American ones, which is nice. In a Chuckanut Schwarzbier, which Chuckanut's all over the BJCP. So
Yeah.
any beer you
I've
can
never
drink
had a beer
them.
from them.
Neither have I.
You're closer now. You should.
Where are they?
Well, they originated in Seattle, right?
Oh,
But
okay. I
I
didn't
think they opened or are opening a pub in Portland.
No shit.
Yeah.
Oh, cool. Okay.
Put that on the list. for
Yeah.
when
I
when
mean,
I'm there.
I have a lot of places to explore in Portland. Oregon. I just moved to Portland, Oregon. Got a lot of places to explore. Haven't gotten out much yet.
When you move to another really good beer place, you're
yeah.
tasked
Right.
of the highest order.
Like, Jesus, at least in San Francisco or the Bay Area or whatever, it was like, new things were opening constantly. So that was fun. But I had my finger on the pulse. Now,
Well, and you were working at a bar where you're like, you want to just send that to me so I can serve it
that
to my
too. Right.
customers,
Yeah.
and then I
So,
get to
yeah.
try it.
Right. I've got my
Yeah.
own bar in San Francisco, Old Devil Moon, and so I got to try just about everything. That did limit my ability to go visit all the other bars, though. I will say that.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah.
They did add another Schwarzbier near your new abode, which is Freem.
Oh,
Freem's
Yeah.
Schwarzbier.
They're getting some love from the BJCP.
Yeah.
In the update.
I need
for
to get
sure.
out there. Hood River.
All
I
their
think it's like an hour to the east of Portland or something.
All their stuff is so good. And then this one's just a funny removal from the commercial examples, but Eisenbahn Dunkel used to be listed in Schwarzbier, and they went ahead and took that out for us so that you don't have to memorize a Dunkel for the Schwarzbier category.
Well, just like they did with Shell's Oktoberfest and International. I think they're trying to clean some of that up.
The next section, the last one we're going to go over, the last broad section is section 9, and that starts with 9A Doppelbock. And this was already one of the more thorough categories because they had to kind of balance between explaining the pale versions and the dark versions of Doppelbock.
Right.
They do that a little bit more succinctly and in a regimented fashion now. They kind of used to explain the broad range of what the color might be, and now they're like, the pale versions are,
right,
light
in the
gold
commercial.
to this. The dark versions are...
It's like in separate paragraphs, even.
It's
I think.
it's broken out into separate instead of
Whereas it was
explaining the whole
peppered in-
category of
yeah.
Doppelbock.
Got it. Cool.
It's very nice.
Yeah,
Does it say in the commercial examples like which ones they consider pale and which ones they consider dark?
Correct.
Yep. And they also say
nice.
if you're entering a BJCP competition that you got to specify whether you're entering the pale or the dark category as well.
Okay.
And they added, I mean, we get a hold of a lot of Doppelbocks
Yeah.
in the U.S., German brewed Doppelbocks in the U.S., which is awesome. And they all have like slightly different characters. So those are super fun to explore. But they added a bunch of pale ones too, which were a little bit more difficult to get a hold of. I don't know that you can get a hold of them, but I'm just saying, you know, if you were served a pale Doppelbock in the past in the U.S., it may have been someone got a hold of Planck, Bavarian, Heller Doppelbock. But they've added a couple others. And we were talking with some other beer nerd friends, and one of them asked if we could think of any regional examples of pale Doppelbock, and I still can't. So if anybody listening has a local brewery that makes pale Doppelbock.
Oh, I thought he was asking about Weizenbach.
Oh, well, I'm stealing it for this conversation.
Yeah. No, but no, because it's a good question.
Reasoning.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Just wasn't sure.
And 9B is Eisbock. And they kind of they made one really simple change to clean things up. They used to use the language of malt esters
Malt esters.
in Eisbock. So similarly to the hop derived esters they got rid of in a previous category, they stopped using that language, and they just say, you know, it has dark fruit notes, which
Nice.
is just a beautifully
If you
easy
were-
way to change it.
That's
If
better.
you were
That's
anybody
better.
who sent an angry email wanting them to change that, I thank you for your service, because that's one I was hoping would get the boot.
And then the last category we'll officially go over for this session is Baltic Porter. 9C is Baltic Porter. And they didn't change any of the commercial examples. So you see, you know, if you see Żywiec or Baltica 6 or Okachim on the shelf, go ahead and grab those. They did emphasize, qualitatively speaking, the kind of fruity character of it a little bit more, which is nice. There's not like one spot where they do that. There's just a couple of extra threads in the description. And they also recognized a little bit more explicitly that the style can vary, because people sort of treat it like it's either only an Imperial Schwarzbier or like it's only an outgrowth of the English exported porter and stout tradition. But there are threads of Polish Baltic porters and other Baltic state Baltic porters that did evolve independently, but also alongside. So that was a sort of long-winded way of them saying it varies a lot, and different regions can have a signature Baltic porter character.
Okay, I'm not sure I knew that.
Yeah. And I don't, you know, we got to drink the Żywiec the other day, and that was like awesome to revisit again. It seemed like it was missing from my local shelves for a little bit, but that is my experience in drinking people's interpretation of Baltic Porter, is that they are quite a bit different.
Right.
And the same problem that the BJCP criticizes some American interpretations of European examples for, which is making things too roasty or too bitter, happens with a lot of Baltic porters here, I think, too. And it should have a restrained roastiness, much in the same way Schwarzbier should, according to the BJCP. And so that, but that doesn't mean that it doesn't vary in character a lot between different examples. Some could be more fruity, some can be a little more neutral fermentation profile. Right. The vast majority of them are still, you know, bottom fermenting yeast, lager yeast.
Right.
And so that's
One of those styles that has just a broad range of possibility. Not quite as broadly defined as Saison, but you know,
What is, yeah.
nothing is. But yeah, that's an interesting style, and a really good one that I wish there were more examples available.
Yeah, seems like along with a lot of these, they're popping up.
Yep,
which is good.
Yeah, I mean, maybe there are enough, at least in the U.S., breweries doing hazies, and maybe people are getting burned out a little.
Yeah, and I think the Baltic porters that I've seen that really try to be traditional are a little bit of a reaction to like pastry stout, you know. And it's like pastry stout, perfectly delicious or whatever, but people are looking for some of those heavier, higher alcohol, dark beers that drink the way...
That are balanced.
Yeah, that are balanced, that drink the way they remember some of these examples.
Right.
And so I don't think there's like a rash of pastry Baltic porters. That's when a brewery makes one, it's a little bit more their attempt at reining that in, maybe. But
yeah. Well, now that you just said that,
I was like, I can already think of an example of a pastry ball. I'm pretty sure Figueroa Mountain's 11th anniversary is a coconut Baltic porter.
Nice.
for their barrel aged
Fig Mountain.
Yeah,
Haven't seen them much lately.
yeah.
I was excited about them back when they first opened, and they were making lots of really great beer. And then I was just up north, and I couldn't get it. And hopefully, they're doing well.
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know if they scaled back a little bit. They used to have a listed version of Vienna Lager.
That's right.
In
They did.
BJCP.
Danish Red is still in Vienna Lager.
It is still listed there. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, if you're in SoCal, you can get that one, but otherwise,
Yeah.
probably not.
Yeah.
Well,
Chris,
cool.
good work
Yeah.
on this.
Yeah, thanks,
Lots
man.
of really good stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks. I tried to get some of the hits, and like I said, or like Chris said, we'll have the more intricate details posted somewhere because there are a lot of small changes, but those were just my favorite kind of biggest ones.
Cool. Well, yeah, thanks, man. That's a lot of stuff to get through, and we're gonna get through every single one of these.
Yep.
And so that's right there, 1 through 9. And we'll
If
be
you're-
back.
Yeah, and if you're watching this on YouTube, make sure to subscribe to the channel. Make sure to follow us on Instagram, follow us on Facebook. If you're listening to this at some point when this gets on a podcast platform, make sure to give us a 5-star review and share all of this with anybody who you think is just into beer, or especially if they're in the Cicerone program. That's something we're definitely geared towards. But join the Beer Scholar community.
Yeah, I love that. Thanks, man.
Yeah.
That's a great outro.
Feels good.
Yeah, it feels good. Feels
Almost
good
like
to be
it's
all
almost
hanging.
like I used to do that outro every single time. I was in charge of the outro when I did my podcast. I was like, all right, everybody, thank you so much for listening to the blah 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 podcast.
Well, it feels good to be together, all hanging out.
Yes.
And we've got 2 more days to be together here in SoCal, and we're going to do a whole bunch of recording. So we'll have
this
all
has
kinds of goodies for
already
you guys. And we will see you for the next one.
Cheers, everybody.
Cheers.
Cheers. Beer.
Check. Beer.
Check. Beer.
Hello. How can I brew like you?
Shave and a podcast. We'll just talk, and hopefully it won't be boring.
Yeah.